Hello, welcome to another session for Mosaic Art. I hope you are all well and enjoying the weather as much as possible. This week I would like to show you a very small and basic mosaic, but this mosaic is made in the so-called indirect method. So the indirect method is when you do your mosaic onto a temporary surface, and when that is dry, you transfer your mosaic onto your permanent surface. So usually you use a glue that is not very strong, a glue that is easily removable. You use a temporary surface such as cotton fabric stretched onto a board, or brown paper is more popular, like thick packing paper, and you do your mosaic on there, and when it's dry you transfer it onto your permanent surface. I would also like to show you how to cut natural stone or any other material the traditional method. So this method that you see here is supposedly the way that mosaic pieces were cut, centuries ago. So this is called a hammer and hardy. The hammer is very pointy, as you can see. Mine has gone rusty, but it still works absolutely fine. I bought it from a website that was in Italy, I believe. And the lower part is called hardy. And again, it's a pointy piece of metal. And traditionally, the hardy, so the lower part, is inserted into a log, and when you work you use your log with the hardy, and then you use your hammer and you cut your pieces like that. Now in my case, I didn't have a log, and I asked my husband to think of a way to put the hardy onto a piece of wood, and this is what he did. And actually it's really practical and brilliant, because I can take it with me wherever I want. It's not very heavy as a log, and you can put it on a table, obviously not on a glass table or anything like that, but you can put it on your counter, or if you're working outside you can just put it on the floor or somewhere else. So it's a very good solution if you're thinking of buying something like this. It's not very cheap. It's only worth buying if you're doing this at a regular schedule, if you're doing this regularly. My hammer is a medium-size hammer, excuse me, but I'm sure you can get a smaller hammer as well. I bought this a few years ago, and I paid around, as far as I can remember, I paid about 60 or 70 euros for the hammer and hardy. But I wanted to get one because I wanted to be able to use big chunks of natural stone. The stone that you see here that I'm cutting is stone, natural stone, that I have collected over the years. Some of them are samples from tile shops, or things that people have given to me, things that tile shops are going to throw away anyway. So if you are interested in experimenting with natural stone, you can always go to your local tile shop and ask, do you have any samples? Can I buy a sample of natural stone tiles? Or do you have any offcuts or leftovers that you're going to throw away anyway? I believe I went to one tile shop one time, and they gave me a small box of some loose tiles and things that they were going to throw away anyway. Working with natural stone is very rewarding. It has a unique, every piece of stone has a unique texture. The texture on the inside of the stone, so not the polished stone, but the texture that you get inside, the flesh, so to speak, always has the most interesting texture of the stone. Now this white stone I'm using is quite crumbly, so it looks a bit like lumps of sugar. You can see it's a bit shiny. So in other words, it's more like crystallized, and some of the pieces they just literally crumble. But if you don't cut them too small, it's strong enough and durable enough for a mosaic. The black stone that you saw me cutting is marble, and it's relatively soft, which is important when you're cutting like this. If you're finding it difficult, you can try different types of stones and see. You can feel it that every color, every stone has a different hardness, and some of them are just really impossible to cut. So if you were to have an offcut of granite, then you won't be able to cut it with the hammer and hardy. Also, slate is something that you can't cut with the hammer and hardy, because it has these the way that slate is created is it goes long ways, doesn't it? So you get like these flakes. So you might be able to cut the slate, but you won't be able to cut it into cubes or squares. So there are some stones that you can't cut with the hammer and hardy, but it's very rewarding, and it's just a very interesting experience. You can also cut glass, and you can cut ceramic tiles a lot more easily than stone, and perhaps when we start our classes again, I can bring my hammer and hardy to the workshop, and we can have a go at cutting some natural stone or tiles or porcelain. The next step that I'm going to show you now is how to make a temporary mosaic glue at home. All you need is a small pan, water, plain flour and honey. If you don't have any honey, for the purposes of just doing a small project at home, you could use something like maple syrup or any other like golden syrup possibly. But traditionally we use flour and honey. Also, rabbit skin glue is a glue that has been used in art conservation and mosaic conservation for a very long time. This rabbit skin glue that I'm talking about, I'm not using it in this video because it's not necessary for this project. But if you are doing this professionally and you have to make a very large project, which is something that I have done in the past, then you definitely need the rabbit skin glue to make your glue stronger. Sorry about that, my children were crying. So the rabbit skin glue, I know that some people have a problem with that because it comes from an animal, but it's something that has been used for centuries. I haven't done any research to see exactly where it comes from, but I know that it's part of the animal, and I don't believe that they kill rabbits in order to get the glue. I don't think so. The other thing is that fish glue, you might have heard of that as well, fish bone glue. I know it sounds really horrible, but basically the bones, I don't know, possibly the bone marrow or something like that, has amazing qualities, and this has been used as well for centuries in art conservation, antiquities conservation, in projects like when they remove a mosaic from a certain site and it needs to be moved to a workshop to be cleaned and restored. So they use these types of natural organic glues to remove a mosaic from its original place. So they do that by applying the glue onto the, say, example, the mosaic floor. They apply a layer of this glue and then they put a special cotton cloth over it. Then they put more glue and more cloth, and when that dries, it's extremely strong, and they are then able to actually remove the whole mosaic from the original place and move it to a workshop to be restored and cleaned, and then embedded into new mortar, and then it can be attached, it can be installed in the original place again, or it can be installed indoors. So if you go to the British Museum, you can see mosaics on the walls. Those are actually mosaic floors that were removed from the original place and they were moved to the museum from different countries, of course, or maybe from some Roman villas. Now, here I'm doing a very basic version of this glue I'm talking about. So, like I said, we have flour, honey, and the amount of honey is always half the flour. So if you use 2 tablespoons of flour, you need 1 tablespoon of honey. You have to keep stirring, just as if you were making custard or bechamel. You don't want it to curdle. You put it on the lowest possible heat and just keep stirring. And you want your glue when it's still hot, so when it's still on the hob, you want it to be thick but not too thick. So you want it to be like runny honey, and then you just put it in a container and leave it to cool down, and you can keep it in the fridge for a few days. If you add a little bit of vinegar, just a tiny amount of vinegar to your glue, that might help the glue to last a little bit longer in the fridge. And if this glue is made with rabbit skin glue, then it definitely needs to go in the fridge, and you need to add vinegar to it to help it from going off. I just wanted to mention that if you look up rabbit skin glue online, it is very available in art, crafts, specialized art shops. It's not very expensive, you only need a very small amount, and it comes in the form of like pellets, and it looks kind of like lentils. And what you do is you soak it in water overnight, that the glue expands, and then you use that mixture of water with rabbit skin glue. You add that to your flour and honey to make your glue. Now, the second step here is, like I said, you need a temporary surface for your mosaic. And in this case, because my mosaic is very, very small, I'm going to use what's really popular in Italy is just simple brown packing paper. Now, the brown paper is okay to use for small projects, but I would not use it for large projects. So normally when I do my work, and the way that I have learned in Greece is you use cotton fabric, very similar to calico fabric, and that fabric is stretched onto a board, attached onto a board with nails or a nail gun, and so it's basically like a canvas on a board. You can put newspaper underneath your cloth so that the cloth does not stick onto the board. That is necessary actually. And then you do your mosaic on there using this glue that I just made for you. But because this project is so small, I'm just going to use brown paper, which is something that you can do at home as well. Now the paper is obviously very flexible, and if it gets too wet it will just fall apart. So you will see in the end just how easily the paper comes off. So the simple steps then for the indirect method is you transfer your design onto the brown paper, and if you are doing letters or anything like that, you must have a mirror image of your final design. So the image on the brown paper is a mirror image of your final design, and that's of course because we are working indirectly. So what you see here is the back of the mosaic. The front of the tesserae, the front of the tiles that I'm using, is facing down, and this is why I'm using the good side, so to speak, of the tile facing down. So the trapezoid shape that I just put down there, you can see it looks like it's grey or very light grey. That is because it's the polished or sewn side of the stone, which is not what I want. I want my mosaic to show the real texture of the stone, which is what you get when you cut a natural stone tile. When you cut it, the inside of it, the flesh, so to speak, that is the real texture of your stone. If you like, of course, you can use any other side of the tiles. You will see if you do get your hands on some tiles or samples, you'll see that some of them are very, very polished, obviously with a special machine. If you like that surface, then of course you can use that surface. But if you're trying to recreate a traditional natural stone mosaic, then you don't want polished marble or polished stone. You want to use the flesh of the stone, which is the real texture. Also, an option with natural mosaics is, because of this is stone, the colors might not be so bright. If you want to have the full effect of the colors, you can always use a specialized varnish for natural stone. You can find that in DIY shops. A lot of the times they use it for outdoor projects, and you might be able to buy just a very small amount, or even maybe a sample again of varnish that is especially for natural stone. That will protect your mosaic as well, but it's not necessary. If a mosaic is made correctly with the right materials for outdoors, then you should not have to put varnish or anything else on it. If you want to install it somewhere where you know it's going to be very, very damp, or if it's a floor mosaic and you don't want it to be covered in moss and things like that, then of course you can varnish it. You can see on some of these black tiles, you can see the veins of the beautiful black marble. Another thing that you can ask for when you go to your local tile shop, or if you look online, is travertine tiles. I never even knew what travertine is, but travertine is quite cheap. So you can buy like a one travertine tile for £1 and chop that or smash it into smaller pieces and use those for something. Travertine is actually a mixture of offcuts of different types of stones which have been crushed and made into a powder or a rough powder, and it somehow they condense all of that powder back together again, and it becomes really hard, and then they cut that into tiles. I'm not sure how they do that, if they add some kind of mortar or something to keep them all together, but the result is these tiles that are natural stone, but they are manufactured. There's nothing wrong with that. That is also an option if you're after a natural texture. But that's why you will see that travertine tiles have all these patterns on them, and unusual patterns. I haven't got any right now to show you, but I can show you maybe at another point in time. The white stone that I am using is looks a lot like lumps of sugar. It's very, very beautiful. It has a crystallized texture, and it is a bit crumbly, so I had to be a little bit careful when cutting it. It seems to be really, really soft when you're cutting it, but it is still durable enough for a mosaic. My design is very, very simple, and this video is to show you just a different method, a different technique of mosaics. By the way, this technique is very, very old, like I said before, and if you research and look at some Roman villas especially that have mosaics, you will notice sometimes that there is, for example, a marble floor, and in the middle there used to be, or there still is, a much more detailed mosaic, and these were called emblems, and a lot of those were made in this method that you see here. So they were made in the indirect method somewhere in a workshop, because they were so detailed, and then they would be transferred and installed in situ. So what you're seeing here is a very old method. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't know why I've learned to do these mosaics on cloth, but in Italy they use the brown paper. But from my personal experience, the brown paper can be a real pain if you're using it in large projects, because you need to be able to move your piece wherever it needs to go, and if it's on paper, it can be torn a lot more easily, whereas when the mosaic is made onto a strong, proper cotton fabric, then it's much safer to transfer and to cut to the size, or cut into different parts if it needs to be installed in different parts. This method I'm showing you here, hopefully, if you would like to try it, is something that you can do at home today. So you've got paper, you've probably got flour, and if you don't have honey, you can use the other things I mentioned before, possibly golden syrup or maple syrup. If you don't have honey at all, then you could just try flour and water, but that can crumble very easily, so it's not really the best thing. You could try it, but it might not work very well. The brilliant thing about this glue is that it's when it dries, it's very strong, but when you're working with it, you have plenty of time to move your pieces around, and the next day or the next week, if you go back to your mosaic and you realize that you want to make some changes, you can very easily take the pieces off, make any adjustments, give your pieces a quick wash with warm water to soften the glue, and then just carry on and do it again, whatever it is you wanted to improve. You will have noticed as well that I am using these different types of cutters. They come in different names, but they're just basic tile cutters, or sometimes I think they call them, I don't know if they call them side biters or something like that, but it's something that you can find in almost every DIY shop in B&Q, and I don't know where else, obviously online as well. And just to remind you that this type of cutters is meant mainly for ceramics and stone. You can cut smalty and glass with these cutters, but they need to be very good cutters, otherwise you will struggle to cut accurate pieces of glass with these cutters. So I would recommend wheeled nippers for glass tiles and these more basic cutters for ceramic and stone. Now what I'm using right here is I am using a little bit of glass, but you can't tell because it looks like stone. So this piece right there, I believe, is glass that a friend of mine made, but it has a texture that goes really well with the stone texture. Some of the pieces are glass here. As a basic principle, as I have said before, you want to do your outlines first. If this is a video that you are watching for the first time, even for this basic design, it's always better to do your outlines first and then fill in any gaps that you have left over. So for example, when I finish the outline of this square, I will be left with these triangular shapes on the lower left side and the lower right side, and then you just need to make a quick decision about how your tiles are going to be laid, what flow, what direction they're going to have. Also, I tried to lay my tiles down in such a way that they won't stick out of the coaster. So I drew all around the coaster as you saw before, but when I'm laying my tiles, I am laying them kind of maybe 0.5 millimeter or 1 millimeter further in the outline of the coaster, because I don't want them to stick out, you know, when I install basically my mosaic. Initially I was just going to do the heart all black with a white background, but then I decided to do two colors. So I decided to do the heart in black, then white, and then whatever was left in the middle of the heart, I was going to do it black again, just to make the design a little bit more interesting. Now, this particular stone, the white and the black that I'm using today, is quite soft, so I didn't struggle at all to cut the pieces. But like I mentioned before, the natural stone tiles come in different thicknesses, and sometimes if you do buy something or if they give you something from the tile shop, you will see that it's just too hard and you can't cut it with a hammer and hardy, but you just have to experiment and try. Obviously some people are stronger than others, but as a start you want to try and find stone that is not extremely hard. If, for example, you tried to cut a pebble in half, then you would probably really struggle, because pebbles are usually very, very hard stone, and that's why pebbles were used intact in mosaics, because obviously they're round and they don't need any cutting, but they are very, very hard to cut. It is possible if your hammer is, you know, brand new and very sharp, but it's not something that you would normally do. So I just wanted to quickly mention that what you see here is very, very similar to say an ancient mosaic floor that you might see when you go on holiday. The first mosaics in Europe were made with pebbles, and following pebbles they used things like lead strips or semi-precious stones to put different accents and different details onto the designs, the mosaic floors that we all know about. But the next step after that apparently was cutting the stone into the desired shapes. So they ended up cutting the stone into cubes basically, which are called tesserae, and those were the mosaic pieces. So what I'm doing here is very, very similar to a very ancient technique. They would have used a hammer, a special hammer. I don't know. I haven't researched to see if they had any special cutters. I don't think it's impossible. I think that in ancient times, craftspeople were very, very intelligent and advanced. If you see all the things that they have built, so I'm sure that there might have been maybe some kind of cutters that they would have used to cut pieces into the right shape. As usual, we're following certain traditional rules, I would say, in mosaic art. So there's a certain way, if you're watching this for the first time, there is a certain way in which we lay the tiles down. So this is, of course, a very traditional way, but we follow certain rules because we know that the result will be much better in the end. So, for example, you try to stagger the pieces. So when you do one row of tiles and then you stick another row of tiles next to it, you try not to have these gaps going across. So you want to try and stagger them as if you would do with a brick wall, so that your eye follows the direction of the stones. The other thing is that we follow outlines first and then we fill in gaps. That's again something that just makes it easier. It makes the process easier, and it's just more structured and organized when you are working. You can see here that some of the pieces look look grey, and that's because it's the side of the stone that has been sewn with a machine. I have used two different types of black. One is quite soft and it doesn't have any other colors mixed in it. It's just black. But I've also used a little bit of the other marble tiles that I had that have white veins going through them. So that's why you can see some of the pieces have white veins going through them. When you work with natural stone, it's a lovely experience, feeling the stone and seeing all the different textures is really interesting, and it can be, perhaps some people love to make mosaics only with natural stone because of this, because it's a natural material, and it is very rewarding and relaxing to use natural stone in this way. I hope that this video is inspiring you to try something that you have never done before, try something different, and you can, of course, improvise. So if you are in isolation because of coronavirus, or if you're just not able to go out and buy things, or you just don't want to, you can try and use what you have available at home. I'm sure you will have a piece of paper lying around somewhere, or a piece of, even a piece of card can be used for this. What I'm showing you is the traditional method, but you can use your own judgment and use, for example, some thin card can also be used as a temporary surface. It doesn't have to be brown paper. It's something that you can do with your children very easily. And of course, this glue that I just showed you is something that you can use with your children when you're doing crafts, when you're doing collage, or any other things like that. If you don't have any other glue at home and you're not able to go and get some, you can just make your own glue with 2 parts flour, 1 part honey, and just make sure that you keep mixing it. And if it comes out a bit too runny, you can always add a little bit of flour to make it a bit thicker. The advantage of the indirect method is there are a few advantages. One advantage is that you can use different thicknesses of tesserae, of stones or tiles. So if you have lots of stock or lots of found objects, but you want to have a more smooth effect at the end of it, or if you're doing something for a floor that needs to be smooth, and it needs to be one surface, one flat surface, then you can use tiles of different thicknesses, which is something that you can't do when you're working directly onto a wooden board. You saw all of my other videos, I was using tiles that had to be the same thickness. Well, when you're working indirectly, you can use anything you have and it won't make a difference. The other advantage is that you can make something in your workshop or at home, and then you can transfer it onto another surface that might be outdoors or on a building or something like that. So the purpose of the indirect method is to be able to make a portable mosaic, a mosaic that can be made in the workshop and then transferred to a final place of installation. If you ever go on holiday and if you ever go to a Roman villa or any other site that has floor mosaics, you might see a floor that is very, very simple, that has a very simple design all around, and then in the middle you might have a mosaic that's a lot more detailed. So that is called an emblem, and the way it was done was the workers would make the floor in situ, the main floor, but the emblem would have been made in a workshop, and it would have been made the way that you see here. So because it was such a detailed work of art, a more skilled person would have done that in the workshop, and then it would have been transferred and installed in situ. Sometimes when you go to archaeological sites now, you can see the area where the emblem was, but the actual mosaic might be in an indoor museum, and the rest of the floor might be in its original place. And There are so many places where you can see original mosaic floors, even in the British Museum. I remember when you go up the stairs, at some point there are mosaic floors on the wall. So these have been taken from different archaeological sites and they have been moved to the British Museum. And sometimes the reason for that is just to preserve them better, from the elements, and for people to be able to see the pictures that are done on them upright. So even though they were mosaic floors, they are displayed upright so that the visitors can see the beauty and the skill that has gone into making these mosaic floors. We have pebble floors, like I mentioned, and then we have countless mosaic floors that are made with natural stone tesserae, so cubes or squares, basically. Another thing that is very interesting is that sometimes you see colors in these mosaics and you think, well, that's not natural stone. But I was taught that some of the stones they used in ancient mosaics, some of the colors have actually, they can't get them anymore from nature. So in those days, I think there were more colors available in natural stone, and of course they combined ceramic with natural stone as well. And as the art progresses, we have more ceramics, and of course we have glass. So at some point they started making glass especially for mosaic art, and this is called smalti. You can get lots of colors in natural stone, but of course it's a limited range compared to the very bright colors that you get in glass tiles. So it's a different type of mosaic and a different style, and it doesn't suit everybody. Nevertheless, it is very interesting to try, and like I said, it's very rewarding to work with natural materials in general. So now I have I've completed the design, and the next step is basically you have to leave it to dry properly, at least for a day. So the flour and honey glue will dry properly, and then the next day you can install it onto your final base. Again, you can use different types of bases. In this case, I'm just using a very basic coaster. I'm just roughening the surface a little bit with a knife just to give it a little bit of grip. But there are lots of things that you can use. First of all, you can actually install this onto a brick wall or any other type of wall with a suitable tile adhesive or mortar. Or you can install it onto like not a plasterboard but a tile backer board, or a cement foam board, or like a board like the one that I used in the previous video. So I'm in a little bit of a rush at the moment, but I'm using a tile adhesive and grout, which I've used before, as you know, and you gently apply your mortar or adhesive onto your mosaic. This is why it's very important for your mosaic to be dry. So you want the glue needs to be dry before you start this next step. Again, there are different ways of doing this, but because our mosaic is so small, I can just apply the tile adhesive at the back of my mosaic, and then I will basically make a sandwich of my base, which is my coaster, and then my mosaic on top, which is stuck onto the brown paper. Now I am doing this very, very gently, but I am trying to press down so that the tile adhesive will penetrate in between the tiles. You might not get a perfect finish, but you can always add your grout on top after. If you are using two-in-one like this mixture, which is tile and grout, tile adhesive and grout, two-in-one, then obviously you can use the same product. But if you are just using tile adhesive, then you can use grout in the end if there's any gaps that you want to fill in. Remember that grout does not have adhesive properties, so grout is only meant to fill the gaps between your tiles. It's not to fix them into place. So it's very important to use tile adhesive or a cement based tile adhesive, or if you are fortunate enough to have materials and the time to make a cement mixture or a proper lime mortar, which is of course the traditional binder that they used for mosaics. So they didn't have tile adhesive like we have now, but they had lime, which was used many centuries before cement was invented. So before cement, before concrete, we had lime, and lime mortars are the mortars that were used in ancient mosaics and up to Roman times as well. Lime is used extensively, and then of course later on we have mortars with concrete or cement in them, but lime putty is something that has been used extensively, and of course for frescoes, as you know. Now what you see here, this sandwich that I made, I have turned it over very, very carefully. You can do this if you're doing a project that's very small. You can do this while your tile adhesive is still fresh, but if you're working on a larger project, then obviously it's best to leave it to set before you go on to this next step. So basically this is one of the last steps. You turn it over, you dampen your brown paper, and as I said, the brown paper is very, very soft and smooth, and you can just peel it off very, very gently. And usually we do this when the mortar is dry, but if you are confident that it's not going to pull off all the pieces, then you can take the paper off. The advantage is, of course, that you can make any corrections the last minute. So I'm just cleaning it a little bit, and then I believe I left it to dry before I did the final cleaning. So in this case now the tile adhesive is still fresh, so I'm just making my edges smooth and just doing the last finishing touches, and then I will leave it to dry before I do the final cleaning. The brown bits that you see on the mosaic are just bits of brown paper that have stayed stuck onto the mosaic, and you can also see the brown color on the mosaic is basically the glue. So obviously the glue is wet right now, it's damp, and it has this honey colored shade to it. So at this point, you don't want to do any cleaning because it's still all really sensitive. So like I said before, you can either leave it to dry completely, or you can remove the paper very, very carefully while your binder, while your mortar is still fresh. In this case, as long as you're careful, it's fine if you remove the paper while the tile adhesive is still fresh. The advantage of removing the paper when it's still fresh is that you can still move your pieces around. So here is the next day, and the tile adhesive is almost set, and I'm just going to very gently clean my mosaic. I mentioned before, when you clean a mosaic, you don't need chemicals or soap or anything like that when you're cleaning your work at home. We're not talking about mosaics conservation or restoration. I'm talking about when you are finishing your work and you just want to clean off the grout. We never use any chemicals. It's not necessary, and especially when you're using natural stone, you should not be using any kind of acidic mixture such as vinegar or lemon, because that will react with the natural stone. Just warm water and a brush or a toothbrush is the best thing that you can use to get rid of the grout. The other two things that you can do as a finishing touch, which I have not done here, is you can sand the edges of your mosaic, and you can also put felt at the back of your mosaic, which is something that I showed you before. And also you can put a little hook or a D-ring, and it'll just make a lovely little present for somebody if you want to give it to somebody as a present. It's really nice to see the natural texture of the stone coming out when you're cleaning it, and of course when the mosaic is dry the colors will change a little bit, but if you pick good stones then you will have good contrast and good colors on your mosaic. And of course natural stone works really well with ceramics, so you can use again the flesh, so to speak, of the ceramic. The texture works really well with natural stone textures, so you can have an added color there if you have different types of ceramic tiles, like light beige or red or brown. You can get extra colors and still have that effect of natural stone. So here I'm just cleaning it with a toothbrush, but again very, very gently, because you can soften the tile adhesive too much, and actually really I should have left it for longer to dry, but I was running out of time. I didn't have any more time to leave it to dry completely, so I had to do the cleaning a little bit earlier than normal. So there you have it. At the moment it looks shiny, of course, because it's wet, but it will go matte when it's dry. Now the very last step is if you're not happy with the gaps in between the tiles, if you think that some of the gaps are just too deep, all you do is, of course, you have to make sure that the mosaic is clean from the glue. You don't want any glue left onto the surface, because that can rot and then you can have mold on your mosaic. So you want to make sure that you clean off the flour and honey glue. You need to clean that off very well. And then you're ready to apply, basically to do your last grouting, which is optional. And here I'm just applying some more of the mixture, because some of the pieces, one piece came out, and some of the pieces were just not deep enough into the tile adhesive. So it's also for safety, and just to make sure that your work lasts as long as possible. So you do your basic grouting on top, and then you clean it with a sponge and clean the edges, and then your work is done. I hope you have enjoyed this video. I hope it inspired you to try something new. I hope you have a good week, and hopefully next week I will be able to do my very last video for the time being, as I will be giving birth very soon to my baby. So I'm going to be a little bit too busy to do videos for you. But I do hope that you get in touch with me and leave comments and let me know what you think about all the videos that I have uploaded so far. And please visit the Expressions Cafe as soon as you can. It's a lovely place, and the garden at the back is very welcoming, and hopefully it will open for business as usual soon. But at the moment you can go for takeaways or to sit in the garden. It's at 73 Bridge Street, Walsall Town Centre. Take care, and I hope you have a creative and fun week ahead.